My name is William Ray Etherton, usually called Ray. I've lived in Northbrook for 65 years and have seen the schools in Northbrook grow from mostly rural, some of them one and two room schools, to some of the finest schools in the nation. To talk about the history of these schools, we first have to go back to establish a base. And to do that, we go to the Northwest Ordinance, the Ordinance of 1787, which set up a program of government and organization for the area known as the Northwest Territory at that time, which they divided this area into states, 5 states: Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The states were divided into counties, the counties into townships. Each township was 6 miles square, and it contained 36 sections, each 1 mile square. Now, this ordinance stated that religion, morality, and education are necessary for the welfare of mankind and for good government. Schools and other means of education should be established and encouraged. So what did they do? They set aside the 16th section in each township, the income from which was to go to establish schools. The ordinance also provided that there should be 3 township school trustees elected in order to administer this 1/16th section. We still elect 3 township school trustees. They don't have too much to do anymore, although they hold technically the title to the sites of all the school districts in the township. Today, about the only thing they do is to officiate at any meetings to dislodge or add to any districts within the area, to establish unit districts, consolidated districts, and so on. Now, they also stated that there should be enough schools in each township so that no child would have to walk more than 1.5 miles in order to get to school. That has become a part of the educational history of our country, because even today, unit and consolidated districts must furnish free transportation for any child that lives more than 1.5 miles from school. In Northfield Township, they divided the township into 8 school districts. Although they were numbered a little differently in the early days, those districts are 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, and 34. Now, earlier, or I should say a little later than that, 3 of the districts, 32, 33, and 34, joined together into consolidated district number 34 in Glenview. Although all this arrangement was made for the establishment of schools back with the ordinance of 1787, no schools were built until 1841. Land was deeded about on the west side of Sanders Road, about 400 yards south of Winkleman Road, to build the first school. And records show that that was the first school built north of Fort Dearborn. Now, that school continued as a one-room school until 1941. It was the first was a one-room school. Then they added one room, and at that time they called it the Winkleman School. Before, it was just called the West Northfield School. The Winkleman School continued on for about 7 years as such. Then they built the Stanley Field School over on the corner of Techney and Landwehr Road. Later, after they sold the property where the first school was located, they built a second Winkleman School on Landwehr Road, the east side, south of Willow Road, which is really in Glenview at this time. The first school in District 28, which is our thought of as Northbrook School District, was in 1844. A timber and log school built by Joel Sterling Sherman, who owned practically all of the land in that north part of the town. He built the school and donated it to the district. Well, I wish I had a picture here to show you that picture of the log school. I have fun telling the kids about this school and asking them if they'd like to go to that school, because there evidently are very few windows and it was just all long log building. They finally built, by the way, that school was located on Waukegan Road, just south of Shermer Road, behind what is now the cyclery, Swin Bicycle Shop. It became a part of a residence. And then when they wanted to build a cyclery, they had to tear that house down. And when they tore the house down, they found the school, because the school was a part of the house. The Historical Society was organized at that time in order to acquire money in order to restore this old school. They got the money all right, but they couldn't find anybody to hew the logs, so they never got the job done. They moved this building over to the land right close to the junior high school. Some vandals got in there and set fire to it and burned about a third of it down. And logs, what were left, some of it was donated to the Historical Society in Holland Park. Some of the logs were used to build a bench just east of the present historical building. Now, the second school was built on Waukegan Road also, but north of Shermer Road, a one-room school, which lasted only about 5 or 6 years, because they moved it then up to the corner of Dundee and Waukegan Road and became a residence. And they built then a 2-room school. 4 grades on the first floor, 4 grades on the upper floor. You know, that was still pretty small for the number of children. There were 65 children in the first 4 grades, with one teacher teaching all subjects to all children, all grades. Then, 1905, the graduating class contained the names of several rather important people in Northbrook. Clarence Bartlemy was one. Orville Keast, he had 2 sisters that were also in that class. Bob Landwehr, Eldon Hands, all were in this one class. The school was a sort of a social center for the people of the area. They had picnics and programs and so forth at the church. And now, on the last day of school was always an all-day affair when they had picnic, had recitations, games, and things of that type. And so it was a great time. But by 1908, it was very evident that that school could not take care of the number of children that were available. So the board floated a bond issue to build a second school. It would have been a third school. This two-story school was a third school. It was a second school. Now, they built this new school, brick this time, across the street from this two-room school that we had, on the corner of Keast and Waukegan Road. 4 rooms, 2 rooms, 2 rooms downstairs and 2 rooms upstairs. $12,000. $1,200 to buy the site. Then 1923, I believe it was, they built 2 other rooms on the east side, added those. Then in 1929, they added a gymnasium, which became a gymnasium and an auditorium combined. And at that time then, they had in the previously built a little auditorium-like, and they made 2 classrooms out of that auditorium. The gym, though, cost all of $24,000. Those figures don't sound very much compared to what it costs to build things today. But the school was the Northbrook School. All elementary and high school were in that room. I'll talk about the high school a little later. Before they wanted to build the Greenbrier School in 1949, Dr. Watson, who was the superintendent of schools, called the board members of District 27, 28, 29, 30, and 31 together to determine whether there was any interest in consolidating the districts into one school district. Well, 27, 30, 31 were absolutely opposed. They wanted to maintain their small schools, even though Maple School, which was 30, and Grove School, which was 27, had only 50 children. They still wanted to maintain their own local school. Now, the second school then, Greenbrier School, built in 1949 on land that belonged to Mr. Edward Landwehr. A whole block. Mr. Landwehr sold it to the school district for $10,000, 1949. Now, the high school wing on this building was built in 1935-36, called the Waukegan Road Frontage. Had a beautiful small library, one of the nicest there was on the whole North Shore. Was a PWA project where the federal government paid 90% of the cost of building this building. The local school district didn't have very much responsibility except that they selected the architect and made the plans for the school. The federal government paid the money for it. The School District in 28 added other schools after Greenbrier. They built the Meadowbrook School and followed that by the Westbrook School, Oak Lane, and the junior high school. They closed Meadowbrook, they closed the Oak Lane School over on the east side, and they also closed the Crestwood School because of smaller enrollments, I guess, but have added on to every one of these buildings several times. The junior high school is many times larger than it was when it was first built. They built a beautiful gym on the Westbrook School. Now they're building several classrooms over at the Meadowbrook School to keep track of all of the children that are available. The second school district, however, the second school that was built in the district was the Grove School, was an area known as Northfield. It was built on Dundee Road, one-room school, District 27. And they added one second room about 1950. But then their population began to grow after 1950. They couldn't build on anymore on that land, and so they bought a new site over on Finkston Road, north of Dundee Road, and built a new Grove School. District 27 also added new schools. They built the Indian Ridge School, which they probably didn't need in the first place because they closed it up pretty soon. And now it's called, it is the Park Board Leisure Center. Then they built the Hickory Ridge School, and then they built the junior high schools, the Wood Oaks and the Shaboney junior high schools. There was another school district, District 30, that built their school on Shermer Road. Two-room brick school called the Maple School. About 1952, they got too big for the number of children that they had to take care of, so they went across the street and built the second Maple School. They have also added other schools. They have the Westcott School on Western Avenue, and they built another school which is now in Glenview as far as the location is concerned, the Willowbrook School over on Happy Hollow. It's a nice train name for a street, isn't it? Now, these were the elementary schools in the township, besides those in Glenview, of course. There was no high school in Northfield Township at all until 1930. Any child wanted to go to high school, he had to get on a train and go down to Chicago to Carl Schurz, or he went to Winnetka over to the New Trier High School, or he went to Holland Park High School, Deerfield Shields High School as it was called at that time. Most of the children did go to Holland Park. They could get on the train and go to Deerfield and then get a bus over to Holland Park. In 1928, both New Trier and Holland Park boards notified the non-high school board. By the way, I should have said that there was a non-high school board that collected a tax to pay tuition for children to go any high school they wished to go to. But these two districts notified the non-high school board that they would raise the tuition from $200 to $250 beginning in 1930. Well, this non-high buyer said, we won't pay that. You think of $250 as peanuts almost compared to what it costs today, because the high school per capita cost today is about $11,000. But these districts said, well, we won't take any children from Northfield Township then. So the board in District 28 decided they would add the 9th and the 10th grade to the elementary school. And they brought Dr. Watson from Glencoe. He was an assistant superintendent in Glencoe. They brought him over to be the superintendent for the purpose of establishing this new high school. It happens that I happened to be the person that they employed to teach in that high school. There were 2 or 3 of the teachers that had been teaching in the 7th and 8th grade that continued on into the program and taught some high school classes as well as 7th and 8th grade classes. I was supposed to teach the social studies, 7th and 8th grade, high school, and the physical education, coach the basketball. Well, we had the first day of school with this new group. And that day, 7 young people came to see us, and they said, well, we're juniors. If you don't have a 3rd year of school, we won't have any place to go to school. So the board had a meeting that night, and they decided to add the 3rd year. So the 2nd day of school, we had a 3-year high school. And that then continued until 1937. The non-high school board paid the tuition of all children, including those in 28, to go to this school. It was a great thing for the District 28 children, because it made it possible for the junior high school people, that is the 7th and 8th grade people in the district, to have music and art and home economics and shop and things of that, laboratory science, which they never could have had otherwise. They didn't have the money at that time. In 1937, however, they decided that they'd like to have a 4-year high school, and so by a referendum vote in the district, they voted to establish a 4-year district high school. And that was, the first year was 38-39, the first graduating class, 1939. That 4-year high school continued then until 1952. In 1947, there was a vote for the whole town, in the whole township, to establish a township high school. That carried, of course, and the board elected Dr. Watson to be the superintendent of the new high school. I had been selected as principal of the Northbrook High School in 1945. Dr. Watson was so busy getting this high school underway that he didn't have the time working with the elementary and high school both. So in 47, when the new high school district was established, Dr. Watson as superintendent, the high school board wanted to continue the Northbrook High School in its present location in the Northbrook School. They did that by making an arrangement with District 28 to pay them rent for the space and so forth during the time that they were there. Inasmuch as I was already principal of the high school, the new high school board continued my contract as high school. So actually I was the first principal of a new 25 high school for that time until 1951, when I left to become the assistant county superintendent of schools in Cook County. The population or the attendance was getting bigger and bigger all the time in both elementary and high school. And so in 1952, the board in District 28 told the high school board they could no longer accommodate the high school. Now, they were building a new high school, but it wasn't ready yet. So what they had to do was farm these kids out to any high school where they wanted to go. Some of them went to Holland Park, some of them went to New Trier, some went to Maine, some went to Niles. Most of them, however, went to Palatine because there was an arrangement for transportation to Palatine. And the Palatine board also agreed not only to take the children, but they employed several of the teachers on an interim basis for that 1 year. The new year for Glenbrook, which was not called Glenbrook at all, it was just the Northfield Township High School, was 54. Because many of the children were coming from Glenview as well as Northbrook, they decided to call it the Glenbrook High School. They continued there for about 5 years, and it became very evident that they were going to have more room. Probably should build a new school. And so they had a referendum vote and decided to buy 75 acres over on the corner of Lake and Finkston Road and build a new school. That school opened with about 700 freshmen and sophomores. Because that was Glenbrook South, they decided to call the school where they had been the Glenbrook North School. Dr. Watson was superintendent of both schools of the whole district. He planned the buildings, and each year that they were built, the high school received the top award for the best planned school building built that year. In 10 years after Glenbrook North was built, put into operation, there was a national survey of high schools made, and Glenbrook North was listed in the top 10 best high schools in the United States. The people of Northbrook and Glenview and the country schools around the edges, all of them which are in incorporated areas now, can be very glad that they live in this area where some of the finest schools in the United States are located. I think